she trained on the red clay of Mallorca for 7 years under the shadow of Rafael Nadal himself, and yet, heading into the 2026 clay season, Alex Eala has never won a single WTA-level match on dirt that truly mattered. That paradox, a clay-bred player who dominates on hard courts but stumbles on the surface where she learned to fight, is one of the most fascinating puzzles in women's tennis right now. And as she prepares to enter the Linz Open in April, ranked inside the top 30 and riding a season that's been equal parts breathtaking and bruising, the question isn't whether Eala belongs on clay. It's whether she's finally ready to become the version of herself that red clay has been waiting for. Let's rewind to understand why this moment carries so much weight. 12 months ago, Alexandra Eala was ranked 140th in the world. She was a former junior US Open champion with enormous promise and almost no professional traction. The Filipino tennis community believed in her, sure, but the broader tennis world hadn't fully caught on. Then Miami happened. In March 2025, as a wild card, she walked into Hard Rock Stadium and dismantled the draw in a way nobody predicted. Jelena Ostapenko, a former Roland Garros champion, went first. Both sets ended in tiebreaks, and Eala won them both with the composure of someone who'd been in those trenches for years, not someone ranked 130 places below her opponent. Then came Madison Keys, a US Open champion, and Eala dispatched her 6-4, 6-2 with a performance so clean that the scoreline almost didn't capture how one-sided it felt. And then, the signature moment, she toppled Iga Świątek, the world number 2 at the time, in the quarterfinals, 6-2, 7-5. A left-handed 20-year-old from Manila, raised in Manacor, taking down the most dominant clay court player of her generation on a hard court in Florida. The tennis world collectively blinked. That run to the Miami semifinals vaulted Eala into the top 75 and changed everything about her trajectory. But there was a shadow trailing behind the euphoria. When the tour shifted to clay that spring, Eala's form didn't follow. She scraped through a couple of lower-level events, lost in the W25 Madrid to McKenna Jones after blowing a lead, and then arrived at Roland Garros for her first-ever Grand Slam main draw appearance, and it all unraveled. Emiliana Arango, a Colombian clay court specialist, beat her in 3 sets, 6-0, 2-6, 6-3. That opening set, the bagel, exposed something uncomfortable. On dirt, Eala's game, so lethal and fluid on hard courts, seemed to lose a crucial half-second of timing. The ball sat up differently. Her flat, penetrating ground strokes that zipped through on hard court lost their bite against the slow, high-bouncing surface. Her footwork, sharp and decisive on concrete, became tentative in the sliding, gritty movement patterns that clay demands. The rest of her 2025 season, though, was nothing short of historic. She won the Guadalajara Open at the WTA 125 level, becoming the first Filipino to ever claim a WTA-level title. She stunned Clara Tauson in the first round of the US Open, winning an epic super tiebreak that went to 15-11 in the third set, making her the first Filipino in the Open era to win a Grand Slam main draw singles match. The crowd that day at Flushing Meadows, thousands of Filipino fans who'd traveled from across the Northeast, was so loud it shook the walls of the outer courts. She reached the final at Eastbourne. She won 2 WTA year-end awards. She captured gold at the Southeast Asian Games. By November, she'd cracked the top 50. By the time the calendar turned to 2026, she was a genuine top 30 player, ranked 29 in the world, the highest-ranked Filipino in WTA history. And yet, clay remained her blind spot. Now here's where things get really interesting about her 2026 season so far and why the upcoming Linz Open could represent a genuine turning point. Eala opened the year at the ASB Classic in Auckland, where she beat Donna Vekic, Petra Marcinko, and Magda Linette before falling to Sinew Wang in a grueling 3-set semi-final. The Australian Open was a disappointment, a first-round loss to Alicia Parks in 3 sets after winning the opener 6-0, but what happened around it told a different story. The BBC reported that thousands of Filipinos descended on Melbourne Park, creating a line that stretched several hundred yards just to watch her play on Court 6. She wasn't just a tennis player anymore. She was a cultural event. After Melbourne, she went home for the inaugural Philippine Women's Open, a WTA 125 event held in Manila, and called it the highlight of her year. having the tournament at home was such a big thing for me, she later told the New York Times, because it's such a milestone for women's tennis in the Philippines and tennis in the Philippines in general. She lost in the quarterfinals to Camila Osorio, but the significance transcended the result. Then came the Middle Eastern swing, and this is where the 2026 version of Eala started to reveal herself. In Abu Dhabi, she pulled off one of the most remarkable comebacks of the young season. Down 4-0 in the deciding set against Alexandra Sasnovich, facing match point, she clawed back to win 7-6 in the third set tiebreak after nearly 3 hours. "These moments are moments I only have dreamed about," she said in her on-court interview. "Selling out stadiums is insane, and being in these matches in particular are just really the ones that kind of stick with you. That's not just resilience. That's a player who's learned to bend without breaking under the most suffocating pressure." In Dubai, she took out Jasmine Paolini, the world number 8, in straight sets, 6-1, 7-6, then pushed Coco Gauff in the quarterfinals before going down 6-0, 6-2. Gauff, notably, didn't dismiss her afterward. "Alex was a tough competitor. Even when I was up, I knew she could come back at any given moment," Gauff said. "I've seen her do it before." That kind of respect from a top 5 player matters. It tells you that even in a lopsided loss, something about Eala's game commands attention. Then came the Sunshine Swing, Indian Wells and Miami, and the results were electric and contradictory in equal measure. At Indian Wells, she beat Diana Yastremska, and then Gauff herself retired against her in the second set. She fell in the round of 16 to Linda Nosková, 2-6, 0-6. At Miami, she survived a 3-hour, 20-minute marathon against Laura Siegemund, the longest match of her career, beat Magda Linette in the third round, and then ran into Karolína Muchová in the round of 16. 60 minutes. That's all it took. 6-0, 6-2. Eala won exactly 2 games against a player who is operating at a level she simply couldn't match on the day. Muchová won 80% of her first serve points to Eala's 39. She took 64% of first serve return points against Eala's 20. The gap wasn't just visible, it was cavernous. And here's the number that haunts everything: Alex Eala is now 0-12 in her career against Czech players. 0 wins. 12 losses. Nosková, Muchová, and others before them, it's become the strangest, most persistent pattern in her game. It's not that Czech players share a single style. Muchová is all variety and touch, Nosková is raw power and athleticism, and yet Eala falls to all of them. There's likely a tactical thread: Czech players tend to combine flat, aggressive ball striking with excellent court positioning, which neutralizes Eala's ability to dictate from the baseline, but there may also be a psychological dimension at this point. When you're 0-12 against any nationality, the number itself starts to weigh on you. You walk onto the court already carrying a narrative, and narratives are heavy things. So the Miami loss cost her. She gained only 120 ranking points, losing 270 from last year's semifinal run, and she's expected to drop into the mid-40s when the rankings update. That's a significant slide, and it means the clay season isn't just an opportunity, it's a necessity. She needs results. Which brings us to Linz. The Upper Austria Ladies Linz, a WTA 500 event scheduled for April 6 through the 12th, will be played on indoor red clay. The draw is stacked: Ekaterina Alexandrova, the defending champion and a player who already beat Eala in Abu Dhabi this year. Clara Tauson, the player Eala famously defeated at the US Open but who's now ranked 17th and playing at a higher level. Emma Raducanu. Jelena Ostapenko. This is not a soft landing into the clay season. But here's the analytical case for why Eala's clay season could be different this time. First, her game has genuinely evolved since last year's clay struggles. When asked after the Siegemund Marathon in Miami how she handles bigger, stronger players, she gave an answer that revealed a lot about her tactical self-awareness. "I do a lot, but I do it to prepare for all different types of players," she said. "I would agree with you that we are in an era of strong-hitting players. I'm in the process of still getting stronger, right? Still being more powerful. But I think I have different, other strengths as well, not just power. Different layers to my game. Those layers, the court craft she developed at the Rafa Nadal Academy, the ability to construct points with angles and variety, the willingness to come forward, are exactly the tools that translate to clay. On hard courts, she can sometimes get away with relying on timing and clean striking. On clay, she'll need to slow down, build patterns, and use the full geometry of the court. If she can trust those instincts instead of trying to muscle through rallies, the surface could actually liberate parts of her game that hard courts suppress. Second, the indoor conditions at Linz could work in her favor. Indoor clay plays faster than outdoor clay, which means her flatter ball striking won't get neutralized as severely as it does at Roland Garros or on the sun-baked outdoor courts of the European swing. The ball won't bounce as high. The rallies might be shorter. In that environment, her ability to seize early control of points, which is arguably her greatest weapon, stays relevant. Third, and this is subtle but important, Eala is entering the clay season with something she didn't have last year. Emotional armor. A year ago, she was a wide-eyed newcomer riding a wave she didn't fully understand. This year, she's a player who's been 4-0 down in a deciding set and won. She's a player who's heard Coco Gauff acknowledge her danger. She's a player who's filled stadiums from Melbourne to Manila to Miami. The moments that used to overwhelm her, the bright lights, the big stages, the crushing losses, she's metabolized them. That emotional infrastructure matters enormously on clay, where points are longer, momentum shifts are more gradual, and the mental discipline to stay patient through a 5-deuce game in the second set often determines the outcome. The Filipino fans, of course, will be watching everything. What Eala represents to the Philippines goes beyond tennis statistics and ranking points. She is the first. The first in so many categories that listing them sounds almost absurd for a player who just turned 20. First Filipino in the top 30. First to beat multiple top 10 players. First to win a Grand Slam main draw match in the Open era. First to win a WTA-level title. First to reach a WTA Tour final. Every time she steps on court, she carries the weight of a nation that has embraced her not just as an athlete but as a symbol of what's possible. That weight can crush you if you let it, but Eala seems to have learned something profound about wearing it differently. She doesn't carry it on her shoulders. She lets it push her forward. And that's perhaps the most compelling reason to believe the clay season could be different. Last year, Eala was discovering who she was as a professional. This year, she knows. She knows she belongs in the top 30. She knows she can trade blows with the best players on the planet. She knows that a 6-0 loss to Muchová doesn't define her, it teaches her. The question isn't about talent. It's never been about talent. The question is whether she can translate the hard-court confidence, the emotional maturity, the tactical variety she's been building all year, onto a surface that demands patience she hasn't always shown and movement patterns she hasn't fully mastered. The Linz Open is 2 weeks away. The red clay is waiting. And Alexandra Eala, world number 29, Rafa Nadal Academy graduate, the pride of Philippine tennis, still just 20 years old, is about to step onto it with more experience, more scars, and more weapons than she's ever had. Whether that's enough to crack the surface that's eluded her, we're about to find out. If you've made it this far, let us know in the comments what you think Eala's ceiling is on clay this season. Can she break through at Linz, or will the red dirt humble her again? Make sure to subscribe to Tennis Insight Story so you don't miss what happens next. This story is just getting started.